Hi, my name is Stuart Stephenson. I'm the principal trumpet at the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra and on faculty at the Aspen Music Festival and School. I hope you are all well, I hope you're staying safe, and I hope you're staying busy enough. I know I'm getting kind of bored here at the house. I have plenty of projects to work on and practicing, but days kind of bleed into days, weeks into weeks. I mean, it's kind of hard to believe it's been, 12 weeks already? Even that might not be right. It's been long. So I hope you're all staying busy and staying sane. Now, I used to be a student here at Aspen back in 2009 and 2010. And that took me a little while to figure that out because it's been so long I couldn't remember. But some of my teachers back then are now my colleagues in the festival, Kevin Cobb, Ray Mace, and it's amazing to see these professionals that I used to grow up listening to and admire, and being able to to work with them and to collaborate with them and on a different level, and that's been a lot of fun. Now, back when I was a student, we didn't have this beautiful new campus, so when I came here 4 years ago to start playing again with the orchestra, I was jealous. I mean, that new campus is beautiful. There's so many places to play, to warm up, to practice. There are rehearsal halls now that are nice and air conditioned. I remember there was one particular hall, and I can't remember what it's called anymore, but it's a lot of times where ACA would practice, and it was basically a glorified barn. It was open, so it was warm, and then it got hot, and then sometimes there was bugs depending on the time of the day. And it is what it is, but I'm really happy to have this beautiful new campus now. And yeah, and it's been great to work with Robert Spano throughout the year now. So he's our music director here in Atlanta, and it's always nice to see him in Aspen because he's trying to shape people's minds, trying to inspire the next generation of conductors, pianists, even just general musicians. And it's been great to see him in that light as an instructor and as something besides just the man on the podium. So it's always great to see him. Obviously, I'm disappointed to not be here this year in Aspen, and I'm sure you are as well. I would love nothing more right now than to bring everybody together to heal, with music, to sit next to these students who are just hungry to play and hungry to learn, and work on that with them, and then make some amazing products. But it is what it is, and I hope to see you next summer, and I'm sure you will want to join us then as well. Now, I hope you'll enjoy this new set of virtual content, and I can't wait to see what's next, and hope you'll join us. Thanks. So now we're going to talk about the Mahler Second Symphony Fourth Movement excerpt that you just heard a recording of. Now, this is a tricky piece for all parts, and actually the third part looks very different than the other parts that I've known all my time, learning these. And I have a few comments, and then I love to have any questions you might have, and we can work on it, see if we can get that sound right. Yeah. Now, one of the things I first heard was there were some pitch issues, and it's always tough on this one because it's soft. You don't want to try to overblow it, and so the tendency is things can be especially sharp. The softer we get, the tendency is things get sharper. Now, if you look at measure 3, you'll notice that there's 2 half notes with, you have a slur and then 2 tenutos. And you played it just basically as a whole note. I think it's one of those the subtle little things where you have to retongue that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of those, it's kind of hard to tell, what you're supposed to do because there's also tenutos on other lines or other notes. But that's one where it does need to take a little bit because the first and second parts are moving there and it needs to be able to match them.
Right.
Sometimes the tonguing was a little bit slow or behind. And I think it's, especially when you're playing softer, lower things, the tendency is the tongue is down and back and kind of out of the way. I think it needs to stay sort of more forward. I know that's an easy thing to say, but you kind of have to make sure you're ready to go and almost like proactively going for the articulation. Not hard, but just, ready to go. Also, you got to, was also talking about pitch tendencies. You have to know where you are in the chord. So measure 3, the first half note, you're the third, and then it changes on the second half note. So you make sure you have to trigger that just to get the pitch lined up correctly. But it's good. I think, I want you to play this down again so we can get an idea of it. But take an idea, or when you take your breaths, see if you can get them a little more calm rather than because it sets you up the wrong way. And you were pretty good, but there was one of them especially that kind of made it a little more tense and needs to make it that much more difficult to play.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, good. Now, for those listening, trumpet tends to overwhelm the speakers on Zoom, so it's tricky to be able to do this. So if it goes in and out, just bear it. Overall, better. And I think also watch your last note, the release. It can be really easy for it to be too clipped, too stopped. And you take this in context with the piece. But overall, good. So how do you do this? Not. So follow the first part. So you have to follow the line and make sure you're mimicking it the same way.
Right. Would you like me to play the first one or just have that in mind while I play the third? Still the third.
I would say I'd try to play along with it, but I don't know if it's going to line up correctly on this. But you know what it sounds like, right?
Yeah, I was actually doing just to practice as doing an a cappella version, like the app a cappella, and trying to have that. And it was just very difficult to align. So I know.
Yeah, the third part it's very independent, but you have to try to think of that, the melody going on over top. So let's hear one more time. Just do the first 3 measures of it. It'll be good.
I did the same thing. My bad. I'm supposed to re-articulate it.
No, that's all right. That's what this is about. I know it's hard to tell sometimes when you're supposed to do that and when you're not supposed to do that. But as the first part, goes. So you just match that articulation on it.
Understood. Yeah. Yeah, I can do that again if you would like. Sure.
Yeah, good.
It is really hard for me to I was having trouble doing that when I was practicing, but But yeah,
it's an uncomfortable lick pretty much for any of the parts. And I never feel fully comfortable when I'm doing it too. And I'm just trying to, try to calm myself down, usually not take too much of a breath, but you have to take enough to actually sustain through it. So
yeah,
it's tricky. And this is always a lot easier in person too. So it's, having to deal with it. Okay, good. Yeah. Well, do you have any questions about this for me?
Yeah. So I noticed just with the model that you sent to us that you just had a perfect, it was the notes were placed perfectly, but there was still a sustain to it. There was still a phrase. And I find there's a disconnect when I want to articulate it and have a really good, clear placement, but the sustain, the line kind of suffers from that. And I don't know, how do you recommend working on that?
Well, it's a little bit easier on my part just because it's the melody, right? I can make my time and I can lead how I want. And you have to work a little bit harder since you're playing the third part. But that being said, even if you're going to be practicing the first part, I think the first thing to do, I'm sure you've heard some great recordings of it. I think the best thing to do is just probably play it slurred first.
Okay.
Just so you can get the nice phrasing and the style you want. And then from there, you add in just a light tongue.
Yeah.
But you heard that was kind of like, not late, but it was a kind of sluggish response, right?
Not on this end. It was super, super clear.
Well, then perfect. Yeah, I nailed it. No, to me, that felt a little bit almost late to response, but not really. And that's because my tongue was down and I was having to do this long tongue stroke to actually be able to like hit the, the front of the mouth.
Right.
Rather than thinking more kind of like it's ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always supported. That's something that I've been trying to work on, is not having my sound just too low, like into pitch. I don't want it. It's always got to be supported and being lifted. So that's something I've been like kind of thinking about for the last year, about the importance of tongue position. If it could actually speed up and like shape the air, something I learned from Mr. Krauss when I took a lesson with him. But yeah, having that like kind of forwardness, I've been trying every day to do that and not sag. But yeah, I could try that.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things to work on that to make that a little better. I think, doing it all slurred. Do you ever do any hoo-poo-two attacks?
Right.
Just an air attack and then a ta. And I think doing that'll help get that lined up. And if you think like, all right, I need this response to be like instant, not a heart attack, but just trying to go that way. So you get the tongue out of the way, you just worry about the air and the response, and then you add that in last.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right, we're here with Renee, and we're going to be talking about the Mahler Second Symphony excerpt. Now, actually, Renee, you and I have something in common. We're both from Northern Virginia. I grew up in Fairfax Station all through my childhood, and your father is actually in the Army Blues Band, which is awesome. I knew a lot of players from the military bands growing up, and still know quite a few of them and get to play with them occasionally. So that's really cool, and you can do some really cool and impressive high trumpet things that I could not do at all. I can't remember what that last excerpt you sent me was, but it was really impressive.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I was listening along and like all of a sudden it went like really high and I was like, oh, okay, this is something different. Cool. No, so that's it's great to be here with you to talk about these excerpts. So of the recording you sent me, I took some notes on it, and I think it boils down to a couple things. Now, coming from that, I think more of a commercial jazz training, as likely you had some of that probably from your dad growing up, just a little bit here and there. So there's a few things that I think you have to watch out for in the section doing orchestral stuff. So for this Mahler excerpt, you're playing second on it, and you're using vibrato. I don't know if you were intending to, but it ended up coming out.
Okay.
And that's hard. It's hard to match that. So if I'm playing and maybe I have a little bit in mind, if you're doing your own, it's going to kind of conflict with what's going on. So I think
especially for a lot of licks, unless it's, solo things that the second or third parts you bring out more, kind of have to be a little bit more still. Now this excerpt's always a little uncomfortable. You're trying to play quietly, but you don't want to get too, caught up in here. But so, a couple of things were, no vibrato, and you have to watch. Do you know when you're the third of the chord?
No.
Yeah, so that's something that'll help, and you'll hear the version, the first one we do, and then when we re-record, pretty much every time you have an F, you're going to have to trigger it, because you're the third of the chord needs to go down, 14 cents or whatever.
Sure.
And then what happens in measure 4 in your part?
I think I'm the solo line, right? I've got the moving quarter notes.
Yeah, so you need to bring that out, and so there's different ways to do that. Some players tongue them. I think you could tongue them, lightly, or you could air attack them to bring them out in some ways. I think it is really interesting, and it brings out and it gets its tension and then releases. And then at the end of that, you have an F where you have to trigger again, which it makes it kind of funky, and there's a lot of stuff going on right here.
Right. Let's write that down.
Let's see, so a couple things like that. And then what I wrote was follow my peaks. So you're listening to the part. I know you were listening on with headphones then. But I think measure probably 3 and 4. I was leading into that, and then I wanted you to take over that line.
Okay.
So would you mind playing it again? So I know playing an F triggered by yourself sounds just wrong, but go for it. And then let's just do the first 4 measures of that, or sorry, 5 measures, and bring out those quarter notes with accents on them.
Okay.
Good. Yeah, better. So I know, F sounds, it just sounds wrong, right?
Sounds really fun.
So we work so hard to try to keep it in tune, and now we're purposely out of tune. But when we get that chord together, it's going to open up that way. That's why in my recording, my first note is an F, and it just sounds flat. But when you put it with the D flat and the A flat, it's be great. Okay, so I think that was better overall. I could still use more on that 4th measure, because it sounds like you're trying to use the same articulation on that as you are in the preceding measures.
Yeah.
I hear. I want more. So try it a different way, and it doesn't really matter. You can try it with an air attack. You can use more tongue. Something like that.
Okay. So you'd interpret,
just to show you, to bring it out. And if you were playing this in an audition and you just kind of played it straight laced, you might get through, but they're going to be thinking, do they know what they're doing, or have they played this before? Even if you haven't, take it.
Okay.
Yeah, let's hear it one more time. Bring that out more.
Sure.
Yeah, better. I thought it was more interesting. I think maybe it ended up being a little bit too loud, but that's also just how I'm hearing over this. That might be very different in person. Did that sound like it was too much for you, or was it kind of, did you feel it was overdone?
Not really. I felt it's definitely different than what I was doing before. I was kind of confused about how to interpret the cap accents over the slur.
Yeah, all the parts are kind of tricky in this, because you get tenutos underneath, slur lines. What do you do with that? How about the ones that are no slur lines, but they're still tenutos, versus the ones that are just by themselves? Yeah, there's a lot of different versions of this, and there's, maybe there's a better way to have written it, but I think he was very meticulous and wrote a lot of things exactly how to play it. But on that, I think you can it doesn't have to be one way. I don't think there's one right way. I think there's wrong ways, but there's plenty of ways that if you play it and go for it in some way or another, it'll sound great. You just want to be able to bring that out. Okay, good. So I had another question for you about just this piece, and also actually for the Shostakovich as well, which we'll talk about later. What are you thinking about when you play this? Or do you have anything in mind? Or are you just like, let's get through this and go to the next one?
Well, with the Mahler, listening to your first part recording, I noticed that at the very end of the take, you kind of sighed, so it was very sustained. And then I guess you were just like really relaxed after the last note of it, just was like, and I feel like that's kind of indicative of how I feel about this excerpt as a whole. Is just, it's one big long sigh. It's pensive and refreshing, but understated. I don't know.
No, that's a great description of it. I think that part of that sigh was me just trying to release some tension, but I think it is part of, because it's never quite comfortable. Mm-hmm. But I'm not, so everything you described about it, I love that. It makes total sense. I'm not getting that though.
Okay.
You may be thinking about it a little bit, but I need to hear that. I need to think, oh, this is nice sigh. Right now, it sounds like you're playing very good trumpet. It's soft, mm-hmm. And you're doing the right tuning things now, and you bring the right parts out. But I'm not getting the vibe of the piece. I don't get the picture of it.
Sure.
And the great recordings you hear, you're not paying attention to the playing. You're just like, oh, this is awesome. And that's what you always want to try to go for. Now, I don't know how often I get that across to the audience. Sometimes it's just me trying to survive the piece and let's get through it and we'll deal with it later. Mm-hmm. But I think if you can try to impart that.
Okay.
Now, I know easier said than done,
mm-hmm.
but if it starts up here and then see if you can bring that out more.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it one more time.
Okay.
You can play that same amount or you can keep going if you'd like. Yeah, better. So I actually have an idea for you on that fourth measure. What if you put a little bit, not separation between each accent, B, 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 just to have it like kind of like a little puff or something, because it'll help give it that kind of sighing feeling rather than, if we see the accent and we want to tongue in and bring it out, it ends up being like, well, trumpety, right?
Sure.
Good. So actually, I want you to. Can you take almost not a slower breath in the beginning? We're getting a little bit. It's that sigh. See if you can get it a little bit warmer and just comfortable sounding. How did that feel?
It was a lot less, I felt a lot less tension in the breath, for sure.
So it sounded very, very different to me. Now, again, some of this is just how it sounds, online, but it sounded warmer, it sounded rounder, and it sounded like it would fit in well. And it's like you're talking about it's a sigh, and that makes total sense. What you did before, I wasn't getting the sigh, and now that's like, oh, okay, I get it. All right, next we're going to be working on Shostakovich Fifth Symphony, the first movement with Ben. Now, Ben, you are naturally, I think, an easy sounding player, which is a great thing. You don't sound like you're forcing it, which a lot of trumpet players do, just because it is a very physical instrument and we have to, muscle things out a lot of times if we don't know how to properly do it. You sound very easy, and I think that is that's your kind of your calling card. But I think for something like the Shostakovich 5, which is a very powerful, hard-hitting, a little bit louder excerpt, it's a little bit out of your comfort zone, which is not a bad thing. It's another skill to obtain. And I have a couple ideas on that on this excerpt. So it's hard to get this to sound really big and open without getting too much strained and then too much force in it. But that's one of those you kind of practice, just softer or all slurred just to try to get the line down and get the air going. Now, I know you had told me you were working on trying to get the articulation to pop a little bit more, and I think, yours wasn't as not forced,
immediate,
more pop to it, as mine was. But that's not a bad thing. So I can talk a couple ways about how to work on that. But I'd love to hear just maybe a few measures of your part.
Sure.
Maybe the first line of it.
Cool.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I think that's maybe a little bit more pop than you did on the recording, but maybe it was also because you were getting kind of tired. Yeah, so
a little pressure today.
Yeah. No, I understand that. That's great. Whenever you're getting tired, and especially on things like this, lean into the tongue even more, because if you can make it pop a little ping more, it'll sound almost louder, right? So that you can just rely on that a bit. And I have to do that occasionally in an orchestra just because I'm getting tired. Or the first time I sent this recording to you guys, my chops were maybe not quite as in shape as I thought they were, at least like for this kind of stuff. So I was having to rely on that. So I think on this, your sound it's good, but it sounds very contained. You're trying to keep this smaller.
The chord, yeah.
And I want a little bit more oomph to it.
Yeah, that's actually a question I was going to ask about the difference between being a second trumpet player and having this like really solid core to the sound, but not overpowering the first player, just sitting right underneath the sound.
So I think probably the best second trumpet player I've heard for that kind of thing is Ben Wright up in Boston. And playing with Tom Rolfs, they sound completely different. I remember from when I was in Tanglewood, it was like, this doesn't make sense because their sounds shouldn't work together, at least in my mind then. Now they do. But because he has such he just lays it down like this big solid block of sound. So I think on something like this, practice it not full volume, not just try to get like a nice open full sound. And from there, once you get the sound that you think you want in your head, then you can start adding in maybe a little bit more dynamics and then maybe a little bit more tongue. So let's hear it once. Do a little bit just slurred, and then slurred, easy, dynamic. Just make it a little bit more meaty.
Sure.
Good. All right. One more time. Can you? I want to think more of like I'm going to call it a yawn breath. So I think the best kind of breath you can take is if you yawn, and an old teacher taught me this. It's basically your throat opens up completely. It's very free. You're not trying to force anything. Now, you can't breathe like that every time, and it would be a bad thing to do for a lot of excerpts. But on something like this, that more open sound. Because if you start with, it's fine. There's no real issues with it. It's correct, but I think it lacks that cushion, that bass on it.
Sure.
think that was better. I know
Forward, yeah.
it's a tough change, and it's not going to work on all excerpts. But I think if you can incorporate that a little bit into, I think, all your breaths, it'll help. Because if you're breathing like that, it also unlocks the, breathing from the belly, right? It kind of opens from the bottom, which has to fill your lungs up. And that's where it gives you that little bit extra support, where if you're getting tired or you need a little bit more air, you can kind of lean into that.
Right.
Good. So I think on the articulation, it's really easy for this to get too ugly, but you kind of have to practice it ugly in order to figure out how to do it, not ugly. Now I think that's in context in the orchestra, it'd probably be fine. If you were sitting right in front of me, your ears would probably be ringing right now. But that's okay. That's what it's supposed to be. So I think it needs to go for it a little bit more. And think about, I don't know how big the room you're playing in is, but think about if you were in a hall and you want your sound to be instantly in the back of the hall.
Yeah.
Not like after it rings, just kind of like boom.
Yeah. So with that, there's like with short, secco playing, it has to have some length to it, to project and have that clarity once it reaches the audience. So I've noticed that, yes, you're playing short, but there's still weight to it. But it's just like, it's just a really long note, but just cut short with a lot of intensity.
No, I think that's a good way to describe it. I think that's what I'm going for, which I'm glad that actually comes across. I think a lot of times when we're playing short things, we think clipped.
Yeah.
And it kind of like stops. And so there's no ring in the sound. And I think it needs to be more like, if you bite your fingernail and go, it's a forceful, but it's open-ended. It's not, you're not clamping down on it. So I think try a little bit longer note, but see if you can keep it open-ended and then start bringing it in a little bit.
Right. I'll do that a couple of times and I'll try with that. Sure. Yeah.
It's funny.
Close out to the end.
The 4 B flats you did, they got progressively softer and softer because the mic was like, this is not good.
Yeah.
No, that's not right. I think it was probably because you're actually getting it nice and short and it was cutting through and the mic was trying to balance that. So that's good. It's just one of those, I think, you have to try to take it from a longer note and don't think about, shortening it or cutting it. It's just you release just either quicker or, slower.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm not trying to huff it. And that's kind of what it looked like you were doing too. I don't know if you ever heard that expression where it's like your whole body goes.
Yeah, I do that all the time when I play like really aggressive stuff.
Yeah, and I know the tendency and I know how it is. And I have to write in my part occasionally, no huffing. I actually have now it's like an H in a circle with a cross through it. Just as a reminder to myself, because there are certain licks and certain things that just kind of, it comes naturally to do that. And I obviously don't want that. Good. So I think the way to work on that is just try to think, never letting your body, like after you tongue, letting it open up and then you're trying to huff it again, trying to keep it just kind of like not tensed, but ready to go and poised.
Yeah, sure. Having that sustain and that slurring feel kind of.
Yeah. That's the idea. So you want to connect everything with the air, even if there's even if it's a short note, it's still kind of connecting to the next thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, better.
But that bite, but it'll get there.
Yeah, and it takes some getting used to it. It's not going to be it's not like a quick fix. It's just you have it now, but you have the building blocks for it. And I think it's the right idea.
Right. Uh-huh.
Now this is going to be different for different pieces, right? Playing Mahler 2, the loud stuff, is going to be different from playing this Shostakovich, but it has some of the same basic tendencies, right?
Right.
Okay, so one other thing I noticed. I'll grab my notes real quick. I could use a little bit more sustain. especially through the half notes. Those are easy. Like we get to them, we're like, oh, I have a second, I can relax on it. Can't relax.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That constant sound.
I like this part on here because it feels a lot better than the first part because it's a little bit lower. It's kind of the meaty part of the sound. And I think if you can get that spin and lean in there and keep it going. So anytime you have a quarter note or a half note, it's leading to the next thing.
Okay.
Ba-da.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
But still having a definition in the front.
Yeah, no, that sounded better. It's a lot more work, I know.
Yeah.
And when I play this, with the orchestra, I have to ramp up into it because I'm in pretty good shape, playing wise most of the time. But this is a different kind of skill set, right?
Yeah.
So I can't maintain. Or I'm sure there are players who can do that, but I'm not one of those. I kind of have to tailor it as I'm going to keep this, ready to go, especially on something like this, because it's a little bit more, you're just going for it a lot of the piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, better. Let's see. You want to start maybe 2 bars before 29 and let's finish it out?
Yeah. Excuse me.
Okay, so there's a couple big things, actually similar to the Mahler, no vibrato.
Okay.
Now I know there's a lot of old recordings that have a lot of vibrato in them, and if you're playing first, you can get away with a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're playing second, it kind of destabilizes a little bit because when I have my second next to me, I want them to basically make me sound better, right? They provide this cushion of great sound and greater style, and like, okay. Or even, third. I know you're playing third on this one. Same idea.
Mm-hmm.
Good. So I need a more tongue and more intensity. And we'll talk about this. And I also had a question for you on this one. What do you think this sounds like? Or what do you hear this style being?
This is very martial, I would say, in the dotted 8/16th rhythms, and the intensity of the articulation just reminds me of like a militaristic march.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so much of Shostakovich's music was like that because of, the state that they were in. So I don't hear it. Just like on the Mahler, you have an idea in your mind. I'm not getting it. So could you actually play just maybe the first 4 measures of this?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, good overall. Fine. Do you think was it matching what I was doing exactly?
No, I wouldn't say so.
No, it's pretty close though. A couple things. No vibrato.
Did I do it again? Really? Oh man.
A little bit, yeah. I know
Okay,
it's
I'll
probably
think about it.
It's a habitual thing, right? We just have to try to retrain ourselves to not do that.
Right.
Now, if a little bit comes in here and there, fine. It's not going to matter. But I think on something like this, you want it a little bit blockier, a little bit meatier, right? So not, this is overdone. We're doing it that bad, but. More blocky chords on this rather than, I think some of them you're kind of like wahing into almost.
Okay.
Actually, try it once for me. All slurred.
Okay.
But give me full sound, full connection on every note. Yeah. What do you think? Did that sound coarse, vulgar, bad, good?
I think I was trying. I guess I naturally avoided the wah thing you were talking about by slurring.
Yeah, and it sounded great. I was getting this just nice full sound the whole time, and that's what you want. Now I know it's a little bit more difficult when you start articulating it because you have the tongue just getting in the way of everything. But if you can think about keeping that sound and that kind of full blockiness, it should also actually make it a little bit easier because you're not going to be working so hard for each note. You're just allowing the air to do the work for you. Can you try one more time? Now add in the tongue, but keep that same blow and same sound and everything going.
Yeah.
Better, yeah. I think that's going to match a lot better than I think what you did the first time, which was great, but it lacks some of that intensity and like drive to it. It needs some of this like raw drive.
Sure.
Okay, now the 8th, 16th notes. Do you think they were punchy enough?
And I think they got a bit triplety.
A little bit triplet, yes. Yeah, so you have to crunch it a little bit, and pretty much every time I've played this, conductor has asked, like, can you keep it drier and even more crunched? So it's slowly evolved. But I think some of it needs to be drier, right? And just really punching it out and going for it. Like I said, it's gonna be a little bit more work on B flat than on C, because you have to wrangle more of the horn together to do that. Let's hear it one more time. See if you can give too much accent, too much tongue, too much bite.
Intonation.
Well, now you're tonguing it a little bit harder. It's maybe a little bit less stable than you were expecting. But what do you think?
Yeah. Overall, I think as strange as it sounds, when I was a little bit more aggressive, the sound quality actually improved, I would say, in the lower register.
Yeah, because on this, especially those low notes, if you're kind of cranking it a little bit, it kind of puts it in the slot where it needs to go and allows it just to be full open sound. So better. I think that's like your bare minimum, your starting place for the intensity of the articulation on this. Give me more.
Wow, okay.
Good. Better, yeah. Does that sound like too much? Does it sound a little ugly?
I feel a little bit less stable, but that's to be expected. I think in general, it's probably more characteristic.
Yeah, I think it sounded better. It sounded like it was easier too. Like you weren't having to fight with yourself to try to make the right sound. It was just kind of like, spit it out.
Yeah, actually, I channeled a little bit of lead articulation and the tonguing the back end of the clipped notes a little bit to try and get that out.
Yeah. No, I think that sounded great. I think it needed that to help give it that raw feeling. I'm not going to play it on B flat because it confuses me now that I've transposed it for so many years.
Oh yeah.
So I could use even more, but I think it's better. That's like the starting place where you just ended on. That's where you got to start on. So another thing I wanted to talk about was make sure you either match my breaths or take them in a different spot. But I think there's at least once where you breathe on the bar line. And I know I didn't. I know that's most of the time you want to keep that going. So anytime there's half notes, just keep pushing through them. And you kind of have to take your breaths during the 16th or 8th rest, which sucks, but it is what it is. So why don't we start maybe the second line?
Sure.
Is that where you have a low B?
Yes.
Okay. Good. Yeah, a little clip there, but that's okay. Yeah, but that's the right idea. And you'll listen back to my recording to see if you can match that a little bit. And I know depending on each part, you might have to breathe in different spots. I know, but especially on those bar lines, don't breathe.
Okay.
And there's plenty of times where I'll have to change my breathing because, maybe I'm sitting in a register where I don't need to breathe and the low notes they're having to take a lot of rest just to be able to crank it out. But, be aware of what the other parts are doing on that.
Okay, so just to be clear, we're expected to stagger breathe rather than match the principle, or vice versa?
No, you want to match, but if you have to, actually, I'll say this two ways. On something like this, you try to match. But if there's other spots you need to breathe, make sure you don't take a breath and, mess up the line or whatever.
Okay.
But other times, if we're playing unisons or certain things like that, I'll be like, okay, let's stagger here because there's no point in us trying to both take us, we'll ruin the line. And I think it just depends on the piece. On something like this, maybe once you get to big number 30, you might be able to do some staggered.
Yeah.
But a lot of this just kind of happens, in line with the others. So you kind of just try to follow them.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Do you mind if we start 2 before 29? Let's do it to the end.
Yeah, sure.
And actually, a quick question before you begin. So what happens at big measure 31, the first and second measures of that?
I think I'm by myself again. Right?
Sort of, right, yeah. So actually, you split the two parts. So in the first measure, you have moving quarter notes with the second trumpet. And then the second measure, you have the same rhythms I do. So you want to bring, so that line, or that first measure of that, bring that out.
Yeah, so 31, I'm on my own, and then 32, I guess, I would be, oh no, those are rehearsal numbers. So the measure after 31.
Yeah.
I'm unison.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2 before 29, you said?
Yeah, to there. No, that's fine. Okay. So that's what I do. I think you could bring out those moving quarters even more.
Okay.
When I know it gets you in this range where you're really spread and it's hard to keep it back, pull it back together. But if you can give it a little more, drive, it'll help. Okay. And watch those quarter notes, the third of 31. Not too short, not ba 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 ba.
Okay. So keep.
What I was going to say is, okay, so at 30, what do all those notes have?
Accents.
Accents, right? I can use more. I don't know if you were playing loud. There was the right sound, the right intensity, but it needs the pop.
Okay.
Because it's got to match what first and second trumpet are doing. Because we're both playing high B flat, A flat, B. We're in unison on that. And we're probably tonguing it pretty hard just to make sure we get it out and make sure it's easy enough. And you, as the only person on that octave, you're going to have to go for it a little bit more.
Okay.
Overdone by yourself, but in line with the other two, it'll make sense. Would you mind doing the same thing again?
Yeah, sure.
2 before 29?
Mm-hmm.
Better, yeah, definitely better.
We hope you enjoyed the first faculty-student presentation of the 2020 Aspen Music Festival and School virtual season. Tune in tomorrow at the same time, 5 p.m. Mountain Time, for an insightful conversation between me, our two featured students from today's segment, and our music director, Robert Spano. We hope you will join us, and thank you.